So it's been raining for a while now. It's been raining. It's a very pleasant summer. Rather unexpected usually. Summer is hellish around here. But so far at least. It's been raining, very pleasant weather like spring. And air is clear. It's humid, of course, too much humidity, but when the sun rises, it dissipates in a moment, so you can breathe. You don't need to suffer too much because of the heat. You're relaxing summer, very unexpected in the middle of everything else. COVID-19, the situation in the country, the situation in the world. And yet we have this unexpectedly too pleasant summer, the like of which I've never seen here before. Spring, almost. So, people are relaxed and happy, laughing, joking, and still, when the weather is good like this, it energizes you. It's very energizing. You can't blame the weather, the heat or the cold for anything. You even recognize that the weather is so good. Now I have no excuse, I'm going to do my thing. Cognitively like this, you recognize the situation. I have nothing to blame for my laziness or for my inattention or inaction. So people are so energized, and they need to around me because there is no money. People already living in poverty and now have to struggle even more. So whatever it is in the environment that can be utilized for whatever reason, well, let's look into that. People go to the field. Usually they never went to the field in the summer, but this summer everyone is in the field, going back to the earth, as it were. Whatever it is that can be found, that can be utilized. Pieces of wood can be made into charcoal. Let's pick that up. They used to ignore it. They used to not even see it. These tiny little pieces of wood here and there. Certain types of plants. Now they're reaping that. These kind of plants that emerge from the earth spontaneously. I don't know what they're doing with it. I don't suppose it is edible. Everyone's active. And me too. In this pleasant weather. Today in particular, I feel so energized. I'm going to do my work. I have no excuses. So, what is my work? I look around me. That's my job description. Someone who watches, someone who observes. And out of that observation, not just of the outside world, but of the inward mental world, not just of others, but of oneself, even primarily of oneself. Out of the observation of such, then comes insights. There comes wisdom. Not in the fashion of Satori or sudden enlightenment or anything like this, but at least in my case, over time, over a protracted period of time of self-observation and the observation of nature, then wisdom comes, and wisdom comes by means of finally being able to discern certain patterns by which things happen, and the reverse side of these patterns which make things stop happening, and so on. And from the gross to the subtle, and from the subtle to the more subtle, from the physical to the mental, to the psychological, and from the emotional to the cognitive, until we reach the bare consciousness itself, and then from that into the roots of consciousness, which are not really describable. There are no words with which to describe the origin of consciousness. When we say avijja, we say the unconscious. That's just a rather meaningless expression, even perplexing to some. So I'm learning in the course of time to let go of the desire to describe these things, even to my own self, or to insist to grasp them with the understanding, with the conscious mind. Just let go of that, and they appear one way or another on their own terms. This is a requirement of gnosis, a requirement of transcendental understanding. You drop that egotistic desire to clutch everything with the intelligence. There are other means of understanding. There are other means of wisdom. And it's necessary to feel how these things operate and to find one's intuitive way through to them. As once you have that perception, it's really a sort of perception of this transcendental wisdom or gnosis. Once you have a perception of it, then you can seek it, you can miss it. You can contemplate it, but not too much, because, again, this is not something that is to be understood, but rather to be directly experienced. And then I'm walking, just coming back from alms round, people here and there, everyone has something in his heart, laughing or crying, active or lazy, standing, walking or sitting. Everyone I see something that is in their hearts, and it's the exact same thing. Bawa. Motivation. Whatever it is that all these people are doing, there in the depth of their heart, they are motivated by something, whatever it is. Different in each case. Motivation. That's what impels us forward in time, to act, to survive, to do this or that, to seek this or that. That's the core motivation. But I have the same myself, only it is conscious to me. That's the main difference here. I am conscious of my motivations, whether they be natural or imaginative, conceptual, of whatever sort there may be. I am aware of what's mobilizing me, what's moving me forward. But I look at the people and I don't see the same. Their senses and their attention and their mental faculties are so bent on the object of motivation, to the extent that they cannot see the motivation itself. Whatever it is that they're seeking, whatever it is that is attracting their attention in this or that moment, the object of attention, the stimulus, is capable of completely enveloping their awareness. Their attention is entirely invested in whatever it is that they're seeking to accomplish or to get done. So this is what sati is. Sati is when the awareness is withdrawn, extracted out of this process. And that takes training, and it takes time. Especially that it's just like a muscle, you know. It needs to be trained continuously. But unlike a muscle, in the course of time, it doesn't lose its, I would say, momentum, agility, sharpness, nimbleness. These are very appropriate words to describe sati, awareness. That specifically, that extracted awareness, the isolated awareness that is insulated from the object of attention, not affected by it, neither emotionally nor cognitively. Stable awareness, independent awareness. And this in turn requires samadhi. It requires that the mind is capable of stillness, it's capable of withdrawal. It's not aroused, not stimulated. And that too takes training and takes time. If you develop these, then what happens next is that you can see your motivations, not just the object of motivation or the thing that you seek. You're no longer enthralled by this. You can see yourself, you can see your motivations. And this is precisely the one thing that distinguishes a mind that is headed towards salvation from one that is headed towards rebirth. That is the one thing. And, all right, let's forget about the cosmological dimension of salvation for a moment. Let's look at it from a completely mundane perspective. The vast difference which distinguishes a common person who's aware of his motivations, who knows what he wants and why he wants it, and who's constantly aware that this is the thing that makes him feel fulfilled in life, in mundane terms, as opposed to someone else who pursues this and pursues that without that level of awareness, or without any of it at all. A vast difference. And one which, in the first case, conduces to happiness. What is happiness? Happiness is contentment and a sense of serenity and safety. And in the second case, it doesn't. In fact, it's the opposite. In the second case, it leads to restlessness, anxiety, fear, confusion, clarity. That's also another thing that exists in the first case and is associated with happiness. Clarity. You're not perplexed about things, at least not about everything. And that which confuses you, which causes a perplexity to your mind, you withdraw from. Whereas in the second case, where awareness is lacking or self-awareness is lacking, the mind is nearly perpetually confused and nearly about everything. That's why happiness is lacking. And this being the case in mundane terms. So, firstly, it doesn't really matter what is it that stimulates you or evokes desire in you. What matters is that you realize that. You are someone who lives throughout this life knowing what you want. And if you don't have something like this, then you make it a priority that you're looking for it, searching, trying to understand. That's a priority now. If you don't already have something like this, a purpose of life, that you are, the motivation becomes that you want to find out what is your motivation. Instead of just living like this, not knowing what to follow, what to pursue, or following others just like that, because others do it, so I'll do it. And nowadays, more than ever before, it is possible for people to do this because of the incredible level of prosperity and abundance and economic affluence that never existed before, not even in the past century, not even in the first half of the 20th century. Could people do this because they didn't really have the same level of economic prosperity. Food produced in such abundance that tons and tons of it are thrown away every day, especially in developed countries. Tons and tons of food. I used to see that with my own eyes. These massive markets. Food becomes expired or is close to expiration, and is just collected in heaps and heaps of food mixed in with plastic that contains it, and someone guarding it so that poor people wouldn't take from it for some reason or another. That level of abundance and prosperity never existed before, and it's possible now for people, especially in developed countries, but also in most parts of the world, to have more time to devote to this kind of question, to this kind of contemplation. The search on why I am here, what do I want to do? What is the purpose of my existence? In ancient times, people didn't have that possibility at all. Yet they were far wiser than we are today. Life expectancy was rather short. Someone lived up to their 50s, that was like they aged. They're not yet dead. People died in their 40s, that was the norm. An old man was a man in his 40s. Now the United Nations, I suppose, still regard people in their 30s as youth, classified as youth. It shows you the vast difference between our times and ancient times. People had to struggle every day with the most basic forms of technology compared to what we have today, in order to till the soil or go hunting or organize a community. It took a long time just to boil water. Today you press a button and it's done. A few minutes. So, with the technology that we have today and the economic prosperity in which we live, we have time. And the ancient people didn't, yet they settled at night around a fire and contemplated these things. Who today produces a mythology? Ancient mythologies were not produced by a person. There was no intellectual or a writer to produce these things. There were, of course, talented people, more people talented than others, but everyone participated. If not as a producer, as a contributor, then at least as a listener. Everyone gathered around the night fire and listened. And the more talented among the audience started to contribute something. The cosmogonic myth is born through that process. And how wise it is, how incredibly profound and meaningful, how it is capable of, just by understanding it, even if unconsciously, even intuitively, just by sensing its meaning, that it immediately affords the listener with a spontaneous sense of purpose and life. People had such humility and sensitivity and high-powered intuition that they couldn't miss out on the question why I am here. They could not ask it. What's the purpose of my existence? How did I come to be here in the first place? What is this place? Is it made by God? Or is it made by a demon? By the devil? Like we Buddhists actually believe. Mara Visaya, the realm of Mara, Mara's dominion, the dominion of the devil. This is where we live, you and me, right now, that's it. So people ask these questions. But today, it's so rare. It's incredibly rare. I recall your attention to what took place in Switzerland, was it, I believe, where the people in a general referendum or something like this rejected the a legislation or a law that was going to allow citizens to have a basic income, whether they work or not. Basic salary for every citizen without any conditions. And of course, someone from the third world look at this and is just scratches his head with amazement, because that basic salary is already equivalent to the salary of the most highest paid in third world countries. And yet they rejected. Why? The argument was that it is going to elicit laziness. It's going to encourage people to do nothing. And there is a point in this. It's not a wrong assessment as to what could happen. If you make a law like this, you're basically encouraging people to, I don't have to work anymore, or I don't have to be disciplined at work. If I don't like it, I can leave. I have this safety, this basic safety that doesn't require me to uphold myself to any standard that I don't like at work. That I have to bring about a certain enhanced sense of effort in order to do my job appropriately. Because if I lose it, well, no problem. I'll find another job and I will behave in it in the same way, and keep doing this again and again until I no longer have to work at all, or until I find a job that doesn't really require me to put a lot of effort in the first place. Not everyone will behave like this, of course, but that becomes possible. It becomes something that is on the table, an option. Or at least that's the argument, right? But that's not my concern. My concern is to look at how the people believe that if they don't have jobs to arouse their efforts, if they don't have to have jobs, then they have nothing else to do. You see the point here? How opposed this is, how it is so much in contrast to ancient times, where people had to work like crazy just to survive, and yet they still had a remarkable spiritual sense of purpose. They still ask these questions, and that's why ancient times basically produced everything that we today are still reproducing in terms of philosophy and psychology and all that. There's hardly ever been anything new since late antiquity. They've produced everything, and every now and then someone comes up with a new theory or a new perspective about the human condition in the modern world, in contemporary times, and someone else a few years later comes and said, look, such and such a community or a civilization or a person said this already in ancient times. It's just that they said it in a different way. Of course, their style was highly allegorical, metaphorical. Their language was different. But they nearly thought of everything. And they did so collectively. And ascetics and philosophers were famous. You could be famous as a renunciate practitioner or as a philosopher. People went to listen to them. Today, again, extremely rare. To the extent that people believe that if you don't have a job and if you don't have to bring your sense of effort to it nearly by force, because otherwise you wouldn't have any money. If you don't have that, then you will end up doing absolutely nothing. And that may well be true. You end up falling in states of deadly lethargy and laziness and so on. Your mind grows sluggish and numb with all the sources of comfort and pleasure that you can consume with your senses. Food, music, all sorts of sensorial comforts and pleasures. Now you grow numb because the mind gets used to whatever pleasurable experience fairly quickly. Even lovers grow used to the love of each other. They grow used to it, and bored with it. Even love, even the highest states of affection that used to drive you crazy when it was new, when it was just starting, when you were absolutely fascinated, infatuated by the other. A couple of years later, no more. You're used to it. You're used to the presence of the other person. You take it for granted. It's not something that you even seek anymore. It's already there. The mind grows used with everything that it experiences repeatedly, and it does so very, very quickly. It grows numb or grows restless, bored, seeking more, seeking something new, something else that it didn't experience before. Eventually it reaches a point where, well, I've experienced everything in affluent countries. This is possible. Even children grow bored with the flow of toys and sweets and whatever it is that is usually, or used to be once upon a time, highly satisfying for children. There's too much of it now. When I was a kid, there were like 2 or 3 types of sweets. That's all that existed. And when they made a new one, there were commercials about it in the television. It would be a very simple type of candy or something like this. Children of today, they are overflooded with abundance of variety of that sort of thing. Toys. They're not even interested in toys anymore because they have the tablet. And that's another issue of great importance. What is the tablet doing to the minds of children? How it is affecting them? Nobody knows. We're experimenting, you see. Parents are experimenting with their children. No one knows. It reaches a point where the mind is driven towards extremes in order to satisfy itself. It's driven towards extremes, even criminal types of it. These shootings that happen in schools and violence. That's stimulating. If you're bored, violence will stimulate you. If there is nothing in the environment, and if you're not the type that can find satiation in some addiction or another, if your addiction is of such hunger that it keeps looking for more and more, this is a major cause of criminal behavior. It's either fear and restlessness or boredom. But the picture becomes immediately the inverse, totally different. Once the mind is trained in order for this self-awareness to develop, when a human being becomes conscious of his motivations, of his innermost psyche, what it seeks spontaneously, or what we want, what we make it to seek, both are important. Because every one of us has something that stimulates him, that presses his buttons. And so you need to know what that is. You need to be conscious of it. And then we need to have a conscious purpose of life. That's something that is to be developed, that is not naturally in the psyche. Something that is to be planted there. It makes a huge difference whether we have something like this mobilizing us or not. And almost always it will be something that is in one way or another opposed to our natural, spontaneous, evolutionary, animalistic motivations. And so it will be hard. That is something that a person can do as a job that requires effort, that arouses motivation, that is challenging, that is allowing the human to transform basically into a god, that is, into someone who possesses such level of self-mastery as to be comparable to gods. That's the purpose of life. Now, in mundane terms, it doesn't matter what is it that you pursue consciously, so long it doesn't involve harm to others, of course. If you know it to be harmful to others, then stop it, because you will regret it later. Rest assured, whatever it is that you do, especially consciously, that involves harm to others, that will bring about your destruction sooner or later. So you desist from this. You develop the highest levels of sensitivity to all that involves harm to others. And then you live freely. Even if you, as a result of this, will live in more poverty or in some difficulty. It's still worth it. What's not worth it is to harm others in order to gain some sort of comfort or pleasure in life. Not worth it. And you won't get any comfort or pleasure. You will live in continual anxiety, fear, restlessness. You wouldn't even know why. That's because every conscious act of harm is planted in the depth of the psyche like a seed out of which poison continually flows into your consciousness, into your emotion, to your cognition. So it doesn't matter whatever it is that you do in life, however much simple, actually it's usually better when it is simple. If it's not something that is too complex, a simple purpose of life is more capable of generating happiness, contentment, serenity. If your purpose in life is to have a family and to take care of it and to be successful in taking care of it, making everyone happy, this is nowadays something that women, for example, are encouraged not to do, or a housewife, for example, is seen as a woman who doesn't have a fulfilling life. It is the opposite. The opposite is the truth. Especially if you're not interested in whatever complex thing it may be that you're going to be doing. If you're doing it only because you believe that society oppresses you and wants you to take care of the children and so on. If you really have a genuine interest in becoming an astronaut or in discovering something in the field of theoretical physics, go for it. Power to. But if you're not, if your purpose is simple one, if your dream is to make a family or to become a teacher of a preparatory school or in a nursery or something like this, go for it too. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this, and it is far more likely that you'll find satisfaction in the latter case because the possibilities of success are way higher than becoming the number one in something or in proving something to the world about women or about society and oppression and so on and so forth. And look at the people who pursue these ideological things. Are they happy? Are they fulfilled, satisfied? Or is it the exact opposite? A perpetual battle against nature, a battle against the world, a battle against humanity, a battle against the gods. That's going to make you happy? Fulfilled? Serene? No, you will descend into the grave with all these grievances taken down with you. You won't find happiness. A simpler, mundane goal of life means a higher possibility of happiness and contentment, not the opposite. The fallacies of the world in which we live. Whatever it is, anyways, whatever it is that you're pursuing, just be conscious of it, and be conscious of your motivation to pursue it. And be honest and humble also in that process. Don't convince yourself that this is the right thing, or that others are doing it, so I'll be doing it. Or don't do it also to please others. It never matters. It never ever matters whether your motivations are convincing to others or appealing to others or not. This is a vast problem, by the way, a problem of very, very serious magnitude. People doing things for the sake of others or in order to appeal to others. It's a problem of high prevalence these days. Everywhere, even people do it to the extent that people do it unconsciously. They're not conscious that their motivations are not for them, are not made for them, are not made by them. They are not conscious of that. And you see the emphasis again and again is on becoming conscious of one's natural motivations and of the need of a transcendental form of motivation, even if it's mundane. Of course, when one's motivation is spiritual, transcendental, religious, then this is a whole different level of existence, I suppose. Because our motivations condition our lives. They determine how are we going to live. If we would exchange the word conscious motivation with job, what's your job in life? What you're doing in life? A monk, he's jobless, right? He has no job. In mundane terms, yes, but he's got another job. The job description is precisely this kind of discourse, this speech that I'm now uttering. To think about these things, to dwell on these things, and to exercise the awareness, the samadhi, the stillness of the mind, so that the agility and sharpness of the attention to become withdrawn, extracted, insulated from the environment, from the senses, to reach higher and higher levels in the course of time, so that wisdom can become at least accessible. And so, perhaps, what I want to say is that don't let the spring and don't let good weather, however much pleasant that is so pleasant, especially unexpectedly like this, don't let that drive your senses and your attention into oblivion. The oblivion of becoming completely enthralled by experience, by the objects of attention, by the stimulus. Don't let that spring that is energizing you so, that is making you feel so good, lose your self-awareness. Don't become so deeply plunged or engrossed in experience in a sensorial sense, because it is pleasant. Wake up, even if it's painful.